Welcome to Genesis 015. This is not Genesis 15. This is Genesis, the 15th of a series. Genesis 1 through 11 are about beginnings. 12 through 28 are given to Joseph. You see, Joseph is about providential. God takes ordinary events and tweaks them to be a predetermined outcome. There is miracle and providential. A miracle is where God acts supernaturally, unnaturally, through an event, and yes, miracles still happen today. Joseph, at 17, was with the sons of his father's wives in the field. I know this sounds strange, but Jacob was married to 4 women. Rachel, his most beloved wife, was the mother of Joseph and Benjamin. She died giving birth to Benjamin. Jacob absolutely loved Joseph and gave him a colorful tunic. Jacob sent Joseph to go to the field to find out how his brothers were doing. In other words, being a supervisor. The tunic was a showy way of doing it. While in the field, Joseph had a dream. He spoke of his dream to his brothers, where his brothers' sheaves of wheat bowed to his sheaf of wheat. They were not impressed. His brothers sought to kill him and throw him in a pit. Reuben, the oldest brother, said to just throw him in a pit and take his tunic back to Jacob. When Jacob returned home to his father, Joseph, he brought a bad report about his brothers. One night, Joseph had another dream. Joseph tells Jacob he has had a dream of the sun, moon, and stars, 12 stars, which includes the parents bowing to him, in this case 11 stars. Jacob rebuked him for such a dream because Jacob thought Joseph was telling him that the parents and siblings would end up bowing to him. Joseph didn't realize that when Jacob didn't realize that when Joseph became second only to Pharaoh in Egypt, this is exactly what would happen. Jacob sent Joseph back to Shechem to feed the flocks with his brothers. Joseph ended up in Dothan, which was a caravan route. On sight, his brothers sought to kill him. They stripped him of his robe and threw him into a cistern, which is like a big pot dug into the ground. Cisterns are dug into very hard ground, so they were like a pot underground to hold drinking water. Joseph was tossed into one of these. After hearing him all night calling for help, his brothers saw some Ishmaelites coming and decided to sell Joseph to them for 20 shekels of silver. This was the going price for a handicapped slave. Genesis 37. Once tossed in, his tunic is brought to Jacob. Jacob was told that Joseph is dead. Once Joseph is sold by his brothers to the Midianites then sold him to Potiphar. Potiphar, or Potipharah, which means given by the sun god, is a captain of the guard and an officer of Pharaoh and the chief cook. The sons then took his tunic to Jacob, who was so saddened he tore his clothes and said, "I shall go into my grave mourning for him." Joseph's brothers were very envious of him. Envy that turns to jealousy is like a bomb. It stays there waiting to detonate. See James 3:16 and Romans 8:28. Israel was in a land where he was a stranger. Israel gave Joseph a tunic of many colors. Jacob had his name changed. Jacob's name was changed to Israel by God. Because he loved him so much, Joseph was a copy of Jesus. His tunic was sewn top to bottom without a seam like the veil in the tabernacle. He had a seamless coat that others fought over like Jesus' robe. Both Jesus and Joseph had brothers that didn't care for him. Both were sold for pieces of silver. Joseph sold as a slave, and Jesus sold for death. Joseph had 12 brothers. Jesus had 12 disciples. Both were accused of crimes not committed. Both were placed next to 2 others when confronted. Joseph was thought to be dead by his father. Jesus was thought to be dead by his followers. Joseph was put in charge of everything in his power. Jesus is in charge of the universe. At the end, everyone humbly bows to Joseph. Same with Jesus. The Holy Spirit put this together. Judah saw and married a Canaanite woman named Shua, which was bad news because she was a Canaanite, which God wanted to avoid. She begat Onan, and Shelah. Married Tamar. Became so wicked in the eyes of the Lord that the Lord killed him. Now that is dead, his brother, his brother, by religion, was to go into wife and marry her. Onan, which was who was next in line, and because of what was going to be the end result, he went into her several times, but each time Onan spilled his seed on the ground because he didn't want to give an heir to his brother, for he hated his brother. God killed him for this, as it wasn't just one time. Judah then told Tamar to go back to her family until his youngest son is older. Judah sends Tamar to remain in the land of her father's house until his youngest is old enough to marry. Tamar is going to Timnah to raise sheep. Tamar decided to trap Judah and dressed like a temple prostitute in the town. Judah had no money on him and offered a goat when he went home, not realizing she was his daughter-in-law. He gave her his ring, cord, and staff for temporary payment. This was like giving her his MasterCard. When he came back to pay her with a goat, she was nowhere to be seen. 3 months later, Tamar is pregnant, and Judah wants her burned for not being married to his son, since she was to give him an heir by his son. Tamar then goes to Judah and proves by the ring that she is pregnant with his children. She gave birth to 2 twins, Perez and Zerah. She gave birth to twins. Perez broke through at birth, and the birthing lady tied a ribbon on him when he went back into the womb. Zerah was born first, though he was supposed to be born second. A Christian is like a tea bag, no good unless put through hot water. Now, back to Joseph. Potiphar made Joseph the overseer of his house and fields while working for Potiphar in his house. While working for Potiphar in his house, Mrs. Potiphar made a play for Joseph while Potiphar was out of town. Joseph refused her advances and attempted to escape. Joseph told her he could not sin against her, Potiphar, or God. In an attempt to get him to stay, she grabbed his garment while he was attempting to leave. She then accused him of rape. Potiphar was told of this and put him in prison. The typical punishment was death, but Potiphar couldn't believe his wife. He had to get Joseph out of the house due to contempt in the house. The keeper of the prison started using Joseph. The prison boss turned all the prisoners over to Joseph. At this time, the Pharaoh put his chief butler and baker in prison for their own violations. During their time in prison, they had dreams. They met Joseph because they had the same cell. By now, Joseph has been given a leadership position in prison. The butler and baker each had a dream. Back then, dreams were a big deal. Dreams were tied to a belief system that had to do with your future, and they were always seeking interpretation. Joseph saw they were sad. He asked them what their sorrow was. Here is a lesson on how to handle sorrows in your own life. When you have your sorrow, put it on pause and look for someone who may have a deeper sorrow than you. Give an ear to them. You may discover your sorrow not near as bad as you thought. Go to a hospital or nursing home and just visit, even strangers. It will potentially give you a whole new outlook on life, and maybe the advice you give others may be the advice you need to give yourself. Anyway, the chief butler spoke of his dream. Joseph told the interpretation of his dream. The chief butler was quite happy about what Joseph had said. Joseph asked him of his dream. The baker's dream wasn't so pleasant. Next, we will cover what happens when you don't think of others when asked. All you have to do is think of them. Let your conscience be your guide.